The Replace Face tool is a powerful tool for not only working with surfaces, but modifying solid geometry as well. For example, in this case, I have a drafted block with some fillets, and I want to replace the top surface by this splined extruded surface that I have. And I can do this by choosing the Replace Face command. And I have to choose all the faces that are going to be replaced by this surface. So you may be tempted to just select the top face and this face and hope that everything works out. But this is going to have rebuild errors. So the general rule of thumb for using this tool is that any surfaces that pass through the surface you generally don't have to select, whereas those that don't, such as the fillets at the top, typically have to be selected for this tool to work properly. So you can see once I choose the right selection, it's going to replace out all those faces with what I just added in. With the Replace Face tool, you can quickly create a cut like this into a solid geometry without having to mess around with a closed sketch or anything like that. We can also do this with the Cut with Surface tool, which I'll talk about in a later video. One of the strengths of this tool is that it can both extend and cut the surface in one feature. So in this case, I have certain parts of the cylinder that I want cut off. And there's a section of the cylinder's face in this area that's underneath the surface. So that section is going to get extended. So once again, I'll choose the face to be replaced. And you'll see next to my mouse icon, there's a picture of a mouse with an arrow on the right click button. If I right click in, it'll bring me into the next selection box. And similarly, if I right click after selecting my replacing surface, it'll complete the feature. So you can see this complex chamfer that would have been otherwise difficult to create is fairly straightforward when using the Replace Face. In this case, I have a part with a body with a helical feature. And typically if I wanted to extend this, I just go into the feature sets and change the dimensions. But you may run into a case where you're working with imported geometry and you might have a gear or something similar that you want to make larger, and that can be pretty simply done using the Replace Face. So you can see that not only was this extended, but those helical cuts follow in the same manner. And once again, that's quite useful for working with imported geometry. With the surfacing tools, there's quite a few ways to modify these cutouts. If I want to remove them out and switch them to all the surfaces I have showing, I could simply delete out these features and add these in, or we can use the Replace Face command. And once again, this becomes very useful with imported geometry. I don't always have to select every face I need to remove. I just need to select a set of faces that makes sense to SOLIDWORKS when it's trying to replace the face. So in this case, you can see 2 of the faces out of the triangle are enough to create that Replace Face. This is once again quite useful for working with imported geometry if we want to move a face. We can simply create a new surface and shift it. In some cases, the geometry might be too complex. You can see in this case that we're unable to create this replace face. And so we'd have to go about creating this feature in a slightly different manner. And once again, it doesn't matter what shape we're replacing, as long as we select the correct series of faces. This feature should generally work. When you create a feature like a fill or a boundary surface, and then you go to thicken it, in a lot of cases you won't have a perfectly flat surface at the end. So if I click on either of these faces, I see there's no sketch icon, indicating that this isn't flat or SOLIDWORKS doesn't consider this surface flat. And with the replace face, you don't necessarily have to encompass the entire part with the surface. For example, with a planar surface, you can simply create a small flat surface and replace something that's external to that. I'll do the same on the other side. And now you can see if I click on either of these faces, I do have that sketch icon, meaning these are now flat and coincident to those two planes that those sketches were created on. Lastly, you can also remove out corners or remove out pieces of geometry by using the replace face. In this case, if I choose this back face and choose the surface offset or surface knit that I created, it's going to extend that out to this back face and simply remove out that feature. So if you do take a feature down to 0 thickness, like in this case, it's just going to remove that out. But that's how you use the replace face tool. As you can see, you can use it to modify quite a bit of geometry. And once again, one of its strengths is its ability to allow you to modify imported geometry.